listening to The Bounding Box, where we talk about web development, geo development, and everything in between. All right, welcome to The Bounding Box. So today I have the joy of talking to Tom Wason, one of my colleagues at Esri. So Tom, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, calling a bit at Esri, what you do there, kind of what your business is.
Thanks, Renee. Been at Esri, I just hit my 10-year anniversary. So I've been
Oh,
here 10.
congrats.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it went by quick. And, um, so yeah, I'm currently on the ArcGIS Hub team. And so I'm a web developer working on the ArcGIS Hub product. Before I joined this team, I was working in professional services. That's where I started. That's kind of Esri's consulting wing. And so just kind of going project to project, grouping together with different teams here and there. And yeah, I think most people, if anybody is at all familiar with me, they might have bumped into me on GitHub, where like you, I'm one of the people at Esri that was fortunate enough early on when Esri was starting to really get into open source, and GitHub was able to work on a few projects, and some of them actually had people use them. So
Awesome. Yeah, I gotta say, all the folks that I've worked with that come out of professional services, I mean, they're on top of it because you really got to cut your teeth in that team, working on some pretty interesting projects and work on some hard problems and stuff. Not just based on like what you're asked to do, but like working with the our own APIs, right? Dog fooding stuff and everything. I mean, they really have to have like a wide knowledge of things. So I really have a lot of respect for those guys because they really know what they're doing.
yeah, you get thrown into a lot of different stuff there. It's funny, like actually, my first when I was the first time I've really been involved with Esri at all at any level whatsoever, I was in college, and I was part of that program where they send a bunch of college kids to, like, one from every state to the UC.
Oh wow.
Something you can, like, join, you apply to get in and whatever. And I was California, and I met Jack there. They like try to get you to some point or whatever while you're there to meet Jack or whatever. And he was just he's busy at UC,
Yeah.
right? He's got to at some point or another be introduced to like all these different college kids. And he's like, you know what you'd be great at? A guy like you is someone we could just throw into something like our professional services program. You get to travel all over the world and do, like he was really selling it like it'd be throwing out of an airplane, with an arc pad and just like parachuting in to clients, offices, all because I was in college and didn't have a family and didn't need to be. And then
Oh.
that's kind of where many years later I actually ended up coming into the company. But
Oh man, that's awesome. That seems like a lot of fun.
yeah, that was a great program. I don't know if they're still doing it, but if there's a college kid listening to this, they should definitely go for that. It's a very cool program. So there.
So Tom, I think one of the things that we share in common from way back when is dealing with frameworks. Frameworks, and specifically web frameworks with the ArcGIS API for JavaScript from even way back in the 3x days of Dojo and AMD and stuff like that. Just give me a little background on, like, your struggles, man.
Yeah, so I, right out of college, I was one of the, that was when the WebGIS, what that meant at that time was like publishing a bunch of PDF maps under a folder on a website. But that's like, I was, one of my first jobs was like write an Avenue script that would spit out all these PDFs, and it was like it's WebGIS. One for each county or something. And so I was always doing WebGIS, like kind of from the very, very get-go. And then my career took this like left turn, and I was just the place I was at before I joined Esri. They weren't using Esri at all. They were not. I mean, there was no Esri. So it became all of a sudden I was just using web. Like I was just doing web technologies, and at the time it was like ASP.NET. And then, and on the front end side, just a lot of open source stuff. jQuery was starting to come up, and then just like the frameworks, and that's where I was just steeped in that world. I just had this time where I was not doing any Esri WebGIS. I was doing Bing Maps or Google Maps or other stuff, and then I got this job at Esri. So I kind of came in with this like period of like where I just wasn't using, like I didn't use the JSAP. I came into like JSAPI 2, I don't know, 20 something or something
Oh
like that.
yeah.
I missed everything before that, right? Um, and I was like, whoa, this is really cool and really powerful, but like it is bumping heads against all the other stuff I want to put in this web page. And I'm having a hard time dealing with it. And I can't be the only one. And then I, started reaching out and finding people in the community, like people like you, where we were trying to figure out ways around these problems. And I didn't even start to try and deal with those problems until I was already working at Esri. I think you weren't yet. I was trying to like get you involved in solving these problems and slowly rope you in. But um, yeah, so that's kind of where I came from there. And then the other thing was, like I said, I was in professional services at that time, and it wasn't like I was on one project using one framework. Every customer we were dealing with would have some different solution. So we would, Angular was kind of one of the bigger ones at the time that we were encountering more often. React hadn't really come up yet. But you just had to like whatever environment you were going into, it would be some different framework, and it had to be solving the same kind of module loading problems, just with a different framework. And
Yeah.
so that's why I really tried to start getting into how do I cajole smart people like you, Dave Bowman, and other people to help me solve this problem in a systematic way that's going to work not just for me, not just for other professional service devs, but for like all of our customers. Um, so that's kind of how I came into it.
Yeah, I think a lot of devs that maybe are newer devs or just from the past, even like past 5 years or so, I mean, I realized that there was a point that we didn't even have AMD. We just had these like look like CommonJS require calls like with Dojo that was starting it, and then Require.js came out, and then Dojo had their AMD loader, and that was like the revolution at that point. It was like, oh, I can build my app and have all these bundles and modules and load them dynamically, do all this really cool stuff. And then, of course, CommonJS comes around, Node, and just mucks up the whole process.
Yeah, they really just like squashed it. I was there on the outside and I was intrigued by AMD. I had no reason to use it. No framework I was using it at the time, but like it seemed like a really cool idea. And jQuery was playing around with it, which was like, oh, okay, this is it. This is gonna be the thing, and it never happened.
Yeah.
So
And I mean, it was a big old stink at the time. There, like ESM was just kind of like an idea. No one had really done it yet. And then I guess finally we're here, or ESM and stuff. The API is ESM, and everyone's all hunky dory happy except Node, which is not quite 100% yet as of
yeah,
this.
yeah. I think about what's happened from the core team, the ArcGIS JSAPI core team in the last few years is just awesome and just amazing. I mean, just how much you can do right now with the API and Node
Yeah.
is amazing, considering where it came from, where it was just a few short years ago. I know it was a long process, and I don't think a lot of people got an insight to how much people like you and Jan especially and others put into that effort, into making it being able to work. Other than Jan had this, always got one slide. This is how many modules
Yeah.
we converted, like at the Dev Summit, like every year, and there'd be a lot of people like cheering and like like really excited, and like people knew what that meant, but um,
And
I
just
don't know.
as an aside, I gotta give a shout out to TypeScript, the TypeScript team and stuff, because without TypeScript, I don't think we would have been able to do it in the time frame we did it. And yeah, I'll probably have another podcast on that at another point, but that was a huge deal for us. And I think maybe just everyone at Esri in general, because, from the API team down, we were like trying to tell people, hey, we have these typings, we're using TypeScript. Guys might want to try it, give it a shot, see what you think. And, I think
Mhm.
some teams really embraced it. Not everyone. I mean, not a lot of teams, everybody likes just regular JavaScript, which is fine. But they get to benefit from our typings too, because even if you write regular JavaScript, you have all the IntelliSense and you get links to doc and all kinds of cool stuff. So
Yeah, I was a late adopter on the TypeScript. I was just as someone who was maintaining a bunch of libraries that already existed that were not in TypeScript, and just the constant request, give us
Yeah.
type, just it just was like grinding on me to the point where I kind of made it a point like you don't need types, um, and now I love them. So,
So I think in that regard too, one of the things that you worked on that you put out, I think right around the time I probably joined Esri, maybe a little before, I can't remember. But when I joined Esri, my first task was to have an AMD loader for for Ember, basically have an Ember CLI build using AMD, and it was tough. I got it. I got it working and stuff, and it was tough. But you had another solution to sideload the API. Let's talk about that one because that I think that helped a lot of devs in the transition process for a long time. Even today,
yeah,
probably still.
if that's my contribution to humanity, was that I worked on a library called Esri Loader that was pretty popular, and it filled this gap between when there wasn't a vision from the core team to how to get from AMD to ESM, and then even once they started on it, like we said, it took a long time, even with the benefit of TypeScript giving you this ability to refactor massively. It just took a long time. And in that period, I had, I basically stolen and pirated the work of other people and put out this thing in a package that was easy to consume, that helped you use the AMD build of our library in modern frameworks and just not know that you were using AMD. So
Yeah.
put one import statement for Esri Loader, your your bundler or your whatever you were using to load your modules would be able to deal with that, and secretly that that import statement would backdoor lazy load a script tag that would bring the AMD build onto your site. And as long as you didn't have the global require on your page, everything worked behind the scenes and you didn't know it. And that was, I think, really, I think it was, I mean, I definitely have gotten feedback over the years that it was a helpful, valuable thing to get people through that transition. So,
Yeah, because it basically works like a dynamic. It looks like a dynamic import statement
yeah,
almost in your code, but you also got to take advantage of our CDN because our CDN is highly optimized with the API. Even today, we've got like over 10 years of experience doing builds with it, so we kind of have a good idea what we're doing. I hope there, so you get that advantage too. And I think even today, it's probably still useful in cases where you deal with like server-side rendering. There are still some use cases where the API, because of WebGL and WebAssembly and some other stuff that we do, that server-side rendering doesn't work 100%. So as Reloader, it's going to get you
yeah,
there. It'll get the job done, which is just fine.
yeah. That's kind of what it is nowadays. It's just it's always there for you. It's it'll work in pretty much. I just hard to imagine a scenario in which it wouldn't work in. Obviously, it's not going to work in Node because it's talking about injecting a script tag, but that's not its purpose. But yeah, so it's a compatibility layer that should work with anything, but most of the main use cases now are solved with the ESM build. It's funny you mentioned the CDN too, because that I just think it's something that people haven't appreciated how optimized it is, or how if you have access to it, like how fast and how like you cannot build a smaller build than that. And believe
Yeah.
me, I've tried, because another thing in professional services, we dealt with a lot of clients that were where they were in closed networks. They didn't have access to this were three-letter agencies or that sort of thing, where their computers were not on a network that was going to be able to pull down JavaScript modules from js.arcgis.com. So we had to do these builds. We had to do a lot of local builds, and I know you worked with those a lot. And I I actually tried to learn a lot about Dojo builds, and I tried as hard as I could to squeeze these things in. And I could never touch what was being put out by the CDN. I was always, my initial layer was always going to be
Yeah.
bigger than the first JavaScript that gets pulled down. I could never get down to what is it now? It's like 200 some kilobytes for the base layer or something like that. I could never do that. It's like 300, 400.
It's a blessing and a curse.
Yeah. So, even these, even when people are using dynamic imports with the ESM build, um, I I don't know. I haven't spent a lot of time comparing. How does that compare to your initial payload there? How does that compare to the CDN? I'd imagine that's got to be that you still can't beat the A and D CDN in terms of how much JavaScript you pull on the first thing. Maybe you can. Maybe if you only import, something from like a utils package, you can
Yeah.
get some really small stuff. But
Yeah, it kind of varies depending on what you're trying to do. So if your initial page is a map kind of thing, then the CDN will get you a few hundred K, and you could probably get close to that with an ESM build and stuff. But like I said, the CDN is still optimized. The benefit with the ESM though is the fact that you can load things as you need them. Hopefully your build tooling will create the bundles as you expect it to, which is a whole other story, which I know
yeah,
you struggle with as well. I mean, build tooling is like it's come a long way over the years, but I still feel like we're just trying to solve hard problems with builds
yeah.
all the time.
And it's only in recent years that other build tools have gotten to where like what you could do with A&D, or even surpassed it now with some of the stuff like ES build and Snowpack and those things that are taking advantage of cache things for development builds. Up until that stuff, we were just trying to get parity with what an A&D build could do, for a decade or something, the better part of a decade. So, yeah, you know, I actually don't have to deal with that stuff as much as you do. I know that you're the guy charged with figuring out every single one of those. But in recent years, I've been on this team, and we use Ember, and so there is one build tool, and we're not even using Embroider, which is Webpack based. So we're using Broccoli, like from
Yeah, broccoli's fun.
2012.
Fun stuff with broccoli. I remember that.
Yeah. So um,
Guys,
that's so I almost envy those problems you have with modern build tools trying to get that to work with the JS API, because I'm trying to fight really old problems.
so where do you on that point? Where do you think you see dev and web dev stuff coming up in the next few years or so? Anything you see happening, or you think could happen?
Well, something the big is happening here, and to be honest, I'm less connected to if you're living in Emberland right now, it feels like an island a little bit, like you feel like you're just kind of not connected to the outside world. So I'm only finding out about modern stuff through following you. But one thing we are getting into on this team, and I know a lot of teams are here in Esri, is web components and using a framework to compile or generate your components. So a lot of us, as you know, we're all using Stencil here, um, and so I think that is something that has its place. I don't. Um, I'm too disconnected to know whether it's going to be disruptive to like framework dominance. Maybe you would know, but I know here it's something that is part of a strategic vision here at Esri. It makes sense here at Esri, but well, outside of us, I'm not sure how
For a lot
much.
of things, I have started, regardless of the framework that I have to work on, or whatever. I've started using it more as a way to glue together web components in some way. All right, so
Mhm.
build a suite of web components, spit them out, and then use whatever framework you need to do to consume them and make things work. React makes that a little more difficult than it probably should be, but the
Yeah,
other things like Vue are fine. They work just great, no problems at all. I don't really do too much Angular. I should do more Angular to get more familiar with it, but I don't want to. But I could.
yeah,
But
me neither.
yeah, plenty of other things I've been playing with it. Like Solid JS is like my new fave right now. I'm really, really digging Solid. I should be trying some more Svelte, but I'm not. I should. It's on my list to get going. but I've really been a lot more interested in some of these more static site generators. So things like Marco. Marco is really awesome. I'm a big fan of Marco. Astro JS. So I'm actually thinking of building a new site for this podcast. A Boundary Box site is probably going to be built on Astro.js. So it'll build out a static page for me, and if I don't want JavaScript, I don't have to load any JavaScript. It's great. But I can still build my site with some JavaScript, and it'll just build a static page. So I'm a big fan of that. And that's one of the reasons I still use Modern Dojo for my main site, is because I could do a build of my entire blog website, and there's no JavaScript at all. It's just all static HTML generated pages, load them up somewhere, and I'm good to go. Well, I'm a big fan of that. So the more I can do that anywhere, the better. I'm all for it.
Yeah, see, I don't even recognize any of those names. I just took them all down as notes. I had to go look into those things. Astro, Solid, Marco,
Yeah,
Polo, you know,
Marco.
like
We need a polo.
but yeah, I mean, I played with Gatsby a little bit a while back, and I love the static aspect of that. So
Gatsby's really cool. I don't know. I don't hear too much about Gatsby these days, and I'm afraid it may have fallen the way of kind of like Ember. Like, it's solid, it works, it's great, but there's just not a whole lot new happening there. Maybe so. New devs are moving or choosing other things. I don't really know, but Gatsby works great, so I'm surprised.
yeah, I think the thing with Ember might have been like too opinionated or too does too much. And I could see Gatsby kind of falling a little bit into that, especially for your average like React dev.
That's true.
They're squirrely. They're hard to they don't like to be pinned down with too much.
They need the flexibility. All right, so before we start saying things we should be talking about, I appreciate your time, Tom. Is there anything you want to, any tips or tricks you want to give people before we sign off?
Gosh, I should have thought of something. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, check out Web Components. I don't have a particular course in mind, but one of the things that's been uh, I don't know. I think it's been good for me recently playing with Web Components is getting out of the framework mindset that we've been in for so many years, and just like thinking about like I don't know, just the whole notion of like there's times in our development that we're doing now with this stuff where we have to go and like query, an element on the page and set properties with it, like with JavaScript, and it's just like wait, and it sounds backwards to someone who's been like doing this framework stuff for so long, where you just got to pass prop drilling everything down and like in all your actions and everything, and all that kind of stuff, and then all these patterns that evolve to avoid that, and you got into these like you got into the like with hooks and all kinds of stuff where you're doing these patterns that are like really different than what, if you're around as long as I've been, like like DOM based
Yeah.
HTML. I'm not saying we want to go back to that, but to remember that at the end of the day, your JSX or whatever it is spit out a bunch of elements on the page, and there is a native API that can like listen to their events and query them and set properties on them and do things or whatever. It's I don't know, it's been really refreshing for me. There's some people on my team that just fluently, I can see the way they code, they go back and forth pretty fluently between this sort of framework oriented way and and just being pragmatic about how to use the DOM. And that, I think that is just like it's kind of it's good. It's good to refresh yourself a little bit.
Oh, awesome, Tom. Well, I appreciate your time, Tom. Thanks a lot, and I'll be seeing you next
Thank you.
time.
Yep. See you later.
Thank you for listening to the Boundary Box today. Please subscribe for more content.